Just one plea. Please, just $10. From a little boy changed the life of a hardened CEO in the heart of New York City. But what could make a powerful man give up everything for a moment of compassion? Stay until the end to witness a story that proves the smallest voice can echo the loudest. The streets of Manhattan were a chorus of chaos, honking cabs, clicking heels, snatches of conversation tossed like leaves in the wind. Winter had come early, icing the sidewalks and clouding breath in the air. On the terrace of an upscale cafe in Soho, time moved differently. Nathan Cole, 32, sat alone at a corner table, his espresso untouched. His frame, wrapped in a tailored charcoal coat and sleek Italian shoes, gave off the aura of power. People glanced, then glanced again. But behind the reflective lenses of his sunglasses and the designer armor, something inside him had been quietly unraveling for years. He wasn't here for the coffee. He came for the noise, urban white noise that mirrored the static inside his mind. Emails, mergers, quarterly projections, all the trappings of a man who had it all, except for the part that made it mean something. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Then came a voice. "Please, sir, just $10. Nathan looked down. A boy, no more than 4, stood there in sneakers far too big and a coat far too thin. One hand held a dirty cloth, the other reached toward him, not for charity, but for work. "I'll shine your shoes," the boy said, his voice firm despite the cold. "I don't need more. Just enough to buy bread for my mom." The words pierced Nathan like no press briefing ever could. He blinked, unsure if this was real or some social experiment. But then he saw them, those eyes. There was no performance there, just a raw, trembling truth. "Where is your mom?" he asked, voice flat but curious. The boy pointed across the street. "She's over there. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." Nathan turned. At the edge of the block, beside a planter dusted with snow, a young woman was slumped against a wall. She looked barely older than a college student, hair tangled, skin pale, her coat more rag than fabric. The crowd moved on. People passed, immune. But Nathan froze. The world narrowed to this boy's rag, this woman's stillness. He looked back down. The boy wasn't begging to be saved. He was pleading to be seen. Nathan stood. "What's your name?" "Liam." "All right, Liam," he said. "Take me to her." The boy grabbed his hand and led the way, weaving through traffic like he had done it 1,000 times. They reached the woman. Her lips were blue, her eyelids fluttering weakly. "Mommy," Liam whispered. "I found someone." Nathan knelt down. Her name was Grace, Liam said softly. Grace hadn't eaten in 2 days. She gave Liam the last of their food that Friday. Nathan didn't think. He shed his coat and wrapped it around her, pulled out his phone, called for a car. When she tried to resist, he held her steady. Her body was feather light. "You're going to a clinic," he said. "Don't argue. Just rest." As the cab pulled up, strangers paused. Some stared. One woman took a photo. Nathan ignored them all. Inside the car, Liam clutched his mom's hand. "Are you a doctor?" he asked. "No," Nathan answered. "But I know someone who is." At the urgent care clinic on East 78th, staff rushed out. Blankets, IVs, questions. Grace was wheeled away. Liam stayed beside Nathan, too small to process what was happening, too brave to show fear. "Will they fix her?" he asked. "They'll try," Nathan whispered. "And so will I." He didn't know then that his entire life had just shifted, pivoted on a single rag and the courage of a child. But as the doors closed behind Grace, and Liam leaned into him, trusting, unflinching, he felt it. Something long dormant inside him stirred. Not pity, not guilt, hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than balance sheets and boardrooms. Hope that began with a voice no one else had listened to, and a promise, silent, sacred, that he would never walk past again. The clinic smelled of antiseptic and urgency. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as nurses shuffled past with quiet determination. Nathan stood beside a vending machine, hands deep in his pockets, staring blankly through the glass panel as if it held answers. He wasn't used to waiting. His world was one of fast decisions, fast solutions. But tonight there was no speeding through this. Liam sat on a plastic chair nearby, legs swinging, eyes fixed on the double doors that had swallowed his mother. He hadn't asked for a toy or food or attention, just silence and space, as if his small body had learned already how to disappear politely. Nathan knelt down beside him. "Are you hungry?" Liam nodded slightly. Nathan bought a sandwich from the machine and handed it to him, watching the boy unwrap it with the solemnity of a ritual. "You don't talk much, huh?" Liam shrugged. "Mom says talking too much makes people stop listening." Nathan smiled faintly. "She's not wrong." They sat in silence for a while. The buzz of the clinic, the calls for blood work, and the distant sound of a crying baby filled the space. It was so foreign to Nathan, this place where urgency wasn't about profit, but survival. When a nurse finally appeared, Nathan stood immediately. "She's stable," the nurse said gently. "Severely malnourished, dehydrated, but we're giving her fluids and monitoring her vitals. She needs rest and warmth." Liam didn't move, just clutched the half-eaten sandwich like a talisman. "Can I see her?" The nurse nodded. "One at a time." Nathan gestured for Liam to go. The boy hopped off the chair and followed the nurse without a word. Nathan watched until the doors closed again, sealing him out. He sat back down, this time running his hands through his hair. What was he doing? This wasn't part of any 5-year plan. He had meetings scheduled in Tokyo next week. His assistant was probably panicking. Yet none of that felt real anymore. Only this boy, this woman, this moment. He pulled out his phone and stared at it. A message blinked. Q4 board review rescheduled. Confirm availability. He put it away. Minutes passed, or hours. It was hard to tell. When the doors finally opened again, Liam came out, eyes wide. "She asked for you." Nathan blinked. "Me?" She said, "The man who brought us. She wants to thank you." Inside the room, Grace lay under a thin hospital blanket, her skin pale but her gaze steady. Despite the wires and tubes, there was a quiet strength in her posture, the kind that came not from luxury but from surviving storms. "Hi," Nathan said awkwardly. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "You're not with social services?" He shook his head. "Just someone who saw your son trying to shine shoes for $10. Grace let out a breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. "That sounds like Liam." "He's brave. So are you." She looked away and her voice came softer. "I'm not sure bravery has anything to do with it. You just keep going because there's no other choice." Nathan nodded slowly. "Still, you kept him fed. You kept him safe. That counts for more than you think." She blinked back tears but said nothing. After a moment, Nathan stood. "I have an apartment. Nearby. It's empty. Clean. Safe. You can stay there, just until you're back on your feet." Grace's eyes narrowed. "Why would you do that?" "Because I can." She hesitated. He could see the war behind her eyes, pride and fear clashing with gratitude and exhaustion. "Just a few days," she said finally. "No strings." "No strings," Nathan promised. And with that, something changed. Not everything, Not yet. But a thread of trust had been stitched into the frayed edges of two lives that had never meant to cross. Outside, the city kept roaring, but in room 12B of East 78th Street Clinic, a new story had begun to write itself, quietly, gently, without permission. One where grace wasn't just a name, and hope wasn't just a word. It was real, and it had finally found a place to land. Nathan helped Grace into the back seat of the cab, his coat still wrapped tightly around her shivering frame. Liam followed, holding onto his mother's hand as if the grip alone could keep her awake. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror, eyes narrowing at the sight of the unconscious woman. "Prescott Urgent Care," Nathan said, then added, "Double fare if you make it fast." The tires squealed as the cab merged into traffic, weaving between lanes with a reckless urgency. Inside, Nathan held Grace upright. She was barely conscious, lips pale, breath shallow. Each bump in the road sent her head lolling, and he adjusted his arms to keep her steady. Liam sat quietly, watching. Not crying, not whining, just watching. It was that kind of quiet that comes from having seen too much too soon. When they arrived, the nurses were already outside. Nathan carried Grace into the clinic himself. She was feather-light. Her head rested against his shoulder, and he could feel the chill of her body through his shirt. Doctors and nurses descended on her immediately. Liam was gently led to a waiting area. Nathan remained close, answering questions, offering insurance details when asked, only to be waved off. "She's covered under emergency assistance," one nurse said. "We'll handle it." The words were oddly grounding. For once, money wasn't the solution. Time was. Hours passed. Nathan paced the waiting room, fielding calls he barely registered. He canceled a meeting, postponed a conference call, told his assistant he'd be unreachable. It all felt distant, like a life he had stepped out of. Eventually, a doctor approached. "She's stable now," he said. "She needs rest, fluids, and consistent meals. Her body's been in a starvation state for too long. We'll keep her overnight." Nathan nodded, eyes flicking to the hallway. "And the boy?" "He's fine physically, hungry, cold, but no signs of injury." Nathan turned to find Liam seated in a corner, drawing circles on a napkin with a dull pencil someone had given him. He was humming softly, off-key but steady. Nathan crouched beside him. "She's going to be okay," he said. Liam didn't answer, just nodded. Then, in a small voice, "Can we go home now?" Nathan hesitated. "Do you have a home?" Liam looked down. "Sometimes we stay places, sometimes benches. Mom says the stars are free." Nathan swallowed hard. "Would it be okay if you stayed somewhere warm tonight? Somewhere with a bed, maybe even some toys?" Liam tilted his head, curious. "Would Mommy come too?" "Of course, all three of us." The boy's eyes brightened faintly. "Okay, but I don't need toys. Just a blanket." Nathan stood slowly, the weight of responsibility settling in. This was not a temporary detour anymore. This was a commitment, however undefined, to a child who had already seen more than many adults ever would. When Grace awoke the next morning, she found herself beneath a thin blanket, an IV in her arm, and a quiet hum of medical machines around her. Disoriented, she tried to sit up too fast and nearly fainted again. A soft voice came from a chair nearby. "You're okay. Liam's okay. You're safe." She turned and saw Nathan, his tie loosened, dark circles under his eyes, but steady. "You stayed?" "I didn't have anywhere more important to be." She tried to form words, but emotion won first. Her lip quivered, and she blinked hard. "Why are you doing this?" Nathan's voice was calm. Because I can. Because no one should be invisible. Grace leaned back, exhausted. I used to believe in things. Used to have a plan. College. Internships. I was going to help kids. Like Liam. But then, things fell apart. She didn't offer more, and Nathan didn't ask. I have an empty apartment. It's quiet, clean, and stocked with food. Stay there. No pressure. Just rest. She looked at him for a long moment. Just a few days, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Just as long as you need. That night, Nathan walked them into the lobby of a midtown high-rise. The doorman didn't blink as a woman in second-hand clothes and a sleepy boy passed by. Nathan made sure of that. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a stocked kitchen, clean sheets. It was quiet, full of the soft hum of electricity and safety. Grace stood in the middle of the living room, eyes wide. This is too much. Nathan placed a set of keys on the counter. It's not charity. It's a reset. She didn't respond. Just led Liam to one of the rooms and helped him into the bed. She sat beside him long after he fell asleep, stroking his hair. Nathan watched from the doorway. There was something holy about the moment, something that pulled at parts of him he thought he had buried long ago. He didn't say goodnight, just nodded and left. 3 floors up, in his own penthouse, Nathan poured a drink he didn't touch. He stood at the window, watching the city blink below. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel entirely alone. The apartment was still that first morning, like the hush before a storm, or after one has passed. Nathan arrived with a paper bag of groceries. Just the essentials. Bread, fruit, oatmeal, a box of Liam's favorite cereal. He didn't knock, just keyed in and stepped inside. He found Grace in the kitchen, sitting at the table, hair damp, dressed in borrowed clothes a few sizes too big. Her posture was careful, as though she was still unsure the floor beneath her wouldn't vanish. Liam was on the floor nearby, playing with a wooden spoon and a plastic bowl, pretending to cook. Nathan set the bag on the counter. Morning. Grace looked up. You didn't have to bring that. I know. She stood and began unloading items. It's a strange thing, waking up in a place where the heat works and you don't have to hide your shoes under your pillow. Nathan watched her movements, efficient, methodical, like someone used to rationing hope. How did it get to this point? She hesitated, then wiped her hands on a dish towel and sat. I was a psychology major, she began, voice measured. Top of my class. I volunteered at shelters, interned at a crisis line. I wanted to open a trauma center for children. Nathan raised an eyebrow. What happened? I fell in love, she said with a wry smile that didn't reach her eyes. He was older, said the right things. When I told him I was pregnant, he vanished. Nathan's throat tightened. I told my parents. They didn't yell. They just disconnected. Said I'd made my choice, that I had to live with it. There was no bitterness in her voice, just a worn-out resignation. I kept moving, stayed in shelters when I could, slept in church pews when we couldn't, took jobs, cleaning, folding, whatever I could get. I didn't mind the work, She paused, glancing toward Liam. I just needed to keep him safe. Nathan exhaled slowly. You did more than that. You gave him a sense of calm most people spend decades chasing. Grace blinked, startled. It had been a long time since someone had spoken to her like that. Later that afternoon, she found a note on the counter. Just a few lines, in clean, deliberate handwriting. You don't have to carry the weight alone. Below it was a book, a paperback novel worn with time. Inside the front cover, another note. My mother read this to me when I couldn't sleep. Thought it might do the same for you. Grace ran her fingers over the words. Her chest tightened, not from sadness, but something scarier. The slow return of belief. That evening, while Liam slept, she sat at the kitchen table and turned the first page. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a ghost. Not just a mother surviving, but a woman rediscovering her story. From upstairs, Nathan watched the glow of the lamp from her window and felt something inside him stir. Not guilt, not obligation, but connection. And it terrified him in the best way possible. For the first time in weeks, Grace didn't wake up to cold. No wind leaking through cracked windows, no hum of a shelter's fluorescent lights, no clutching her son in the dark to fend off strangers or silence his hunger. Just stillness, the muted hush of a warm apartment high above the city. Liam had already claimed a corner of the second bedroom, where he built an imaginary fortress out of throw pillows and blankets. His laughter echoed faintly down the hallway. Grace wandered into the kitchen, still uncertain whether she belonged in a place like this. The marble counters, the fully stocked fridge, the soft hum of appliances, everything felt borrowed, like a dream she wasn't sure she had permission to hold. Nathan arrived mid-morning with a bag of groceries and a carton of orange juice. He wore jeans and a navy sweater, nothing like the suit-clad image she had met on the street. I hope you're okay with pancakes, he said casually, setting the items on the counter. Grace blinked, half amused. You know how to cook pancakes? Badly, but I make up for it in persistence. They worked in silence, a rhythm forming. Nathan whisked while Grace flipped. Liam watched from the bar stool, giggling each time the pancake landed slightly off-center. After breakfast, Nathan lingered longer than usual. They sat on the couch as Liam colored on a pad of paper nearby. Grace told him more about her time working with trauma victims, how she had once dreamed of opening a center for children who had nowhere to go. You'd have been amazing at that, Nathan said. Grace looked at him, her expression soft. Maybe. But dreams don't mean much when you can't afford diapers. His response was quiet but steady. Maybe they just need the right partner. The words hung in the air, heavier than she expected. That night, Nathan returned to his penthouse 3 floors up. The view stretched wide and glittering, but his eyes kept drifting to the window just below, where a soft yellow lamp glowed from Grace's apartment. He remembered the way she tucked Liam in, the lullaby she sang in a voice slightly hoarse but full of warmth. It wasn't grand. It wasn't loud. But it was real. In his own bedroom, cold and pristine, Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, his phone still in his hand. Unread emails, meeting invites, stock alerts. And for once, none of it seemed urgent. He thought of a woman who carried dignity like armor, and a child who had offered to shine shoes with a cloth and a trembling voice. He stood, walked to his bookshelf, and pulled out an old leather journal. Inside, photos of someone he hadn't let himself think of in years. Claire. Her handwriting danced across the page. Notes she'd scribbled, ideas for short stories, a quote underlined twice. Love is not soft. It is fierce and surviving. He traced the ink with his finger, then closed the book and stared into the night. Below, Grace turned out the light. And in the silence between 2 windows, something began to shift. Not out of pity, not obligation, but the beginning of something he hadn't dared feel since loss had closed its fists around him. Possibility. The next morning, Grace found a folded envelope on the counter. Inside was a library card and a sticky note that read, "Thought you might want to check out that book you mentioned. I'll be back around 5 with dessert." She smiled, a small smile, the kind that crept up slowly, unsure if it had permission, but it stayed, just like her. Saturday arrived wrapped in rare sunshine. Nathan suggested a trip to Central Park, something light and spontaneous. Grace hesitated, instinctively wary of attention, but Liam had already pulled on his jacket and was spinning with excitement. The city was beginning to thaw. Snow melted in thin rivulets along the sidewalks. They strolled through the park, Liam racing ahead, his scarf trailing behind like a cape. Grace walked beside Nathan in silence, hands tucked into her coat, absorbing the sound of her son's laughter. "I brought a camera," Nathan said, lifting the strap off his shoulder. "Mind if I get a few shots?" Grace gave a small, amused glance. "Of Liam? Sure. He'll pose like a pro." And he did, grinning from atop a boulder, making silly faces, pointing at ducks. Nathan clicked away, not just preserving images, but anchoring something deeper, proof that this moment had existed. "Let me take one of you two," he said, gesturing toward a bench. Grace sat, pulling Liam into her lap. Nathan focused the lens, framed the shot, and froze. There it was, something warm and real, something he hadn't seen even in the most curated portraits. A mother and child, wrapped not in perfection, but in the defiant joy of survival. Liam jumped down. "Your turn. Mommy, take one of me and Nathan." Grace raised an eyebrow. Nathan shrugged, then sat beside Liam, who climbed into his lap and wrapped his arms around his neck. Click. "Can I see it?" Liam asked, bouncing on his toes. Nathan showed him the screen. "It's our pretend family photo," the boy announced. Grace turned away, but not fast enough to hide the glisten in her eyes. Nathan didn't push it. Some truths didn't need to be named aloud. Later that afternoon, back at the apartment, Grace brewed tea while Liam napped. Nathan stayed longer than he meant to. They spoke of books, of childhood, of what used to matter before life demanded too much. As Nathan was leaving, he slipped a $50 bill into the side pocket of Grace's diaper bag, careful not to make it obvious. The next morning, when he returned with groceries, he found his wallet on the counter, open. Inside, the same $50 bill was folded neatly. No note, no confrontation, just an action that spoke volumes. He stared at it for a long moment, chest tightening. She didn't want to be rescued. She wanted to be respected. That evening, after Liam had gone to bed and the apartment had gone quiet, Nathan stopped by again. This time, he carried a worn paperback novel. "Thought you might like this," he said, offering it with a quiet smile. "It was my mother's favorite." Grace took it gently, surprised. "Thank you." Inside the front cover, there's a card. "You don't have to read it now." She nodded, then watched him go. Alone, Grace opened the book. Inside, a note, handwritten, "You deserve more than survival. You deserve to be seen, heard, and loved." Her breath caught. Her fingers trembled. And for the first time, she let herself hope, not just for Liam, but for herself. The following week unfolded like a rhythm learned too late. Quiet mornings, shared meals, laughter from a child who finally felt safe. But beneath the surface, something deeper brewed, unseen and unspoken. Grace had grown comfortable enough to smile more easily, to let herself enjoy the small things, a warm cup of tea, Liam's drawings plastered to the fridge, the softness of carpet beneath her feet. Yet she never unpacked fully, and Nathan noticed. She kept her bag zipped, her shoes near the door. He didn't ask why. Not yet. One crisp Tuesday afternoon, Nathan returned from work early. He had something he wanted to show her, An idea, a proposal, not romantic, not yet, but a role she might fill at his company's new foundation, one tailored for someone like her, someone who had lived, not just studied, hardship. But when he opened the apartment door, he sensed it immediately. Something was off. Too quiet. Too still. He walked to the kitchen and froze. His wallet sat on the counter, open. Inside, a $50 bill, returned once more. And beside it, a handwritten note, small and neat. Thank you for saving me, but I don't belong in your world. His heart sank. He ran through the rooms. Empty. Her bag was gone. Liam's shoes were missing. The apartment felt hollow, like a balloon suddenly deflated. Nathan grabbed his coat and took the stairs 2 at a time. Out on the sidewalk, he looked everywhere, up and down the street, across to the park. He asked the doorman, the bakery clerk on the corner. No one had seen her. The clouds rolled in. Rain began to fall. He checked the subway entrance, the bus stop, even the library where she once borrowed books. Nothing. Panic clawed at his chest. Not the kind he knew from market crashes or boardroom failures. A deeper kind. One that had nothing to do with loss of assets. This was the ache of something real slipping away. Finally, near the entrance of a small park downtown, he saw them. 2 figures huddled beneath a narrow awning, soaked and still. Grace sat curled against the wall, her coat clinging to her, her arms wrapped around Liam, who slept fitfully in her lap. Nathan approached slowly, rain pooling at his feet. She looked up. Their eyes met. No words at first, just the sound of rain and the thudding of Nathan's heart. He knelt beside her, not caring that he was drenched. "Please don't go," he said, voice breaking. "You don't belong in my world. Grace, you are my world." She shook her head, tears mingling with the rain. "You don't know what you're saying. You have a name, a future, everything. I'm just—" "Don't," he interrupted. "Don't finish that sentence. You walked into my life when I thought it was already over. You showed me what love looks like when it fights to survive." She looked down at Liam, who stirred but didn't wake. "I am not asking you to stay, because I pity you," Nathan said, his voice low but steady. "I'm asking because I can't imagine waking up tomorrow without knowing you're close." She closed her eyes. When she opened them again, the storm had quieted. Not outside, but within. She reached for his hand. And for the first time in years, Nathan felt like he'd found solid ground. Not on a rooftop, not in a deal, but here, beneath an awning, holding hands with the only people who had ever made him feel found. They returned to the apartment just before midnight, drenched, exhausted, and silent. Nathan carried Liam, who had fallen back asleep in Grace's arms during the ride back. Grace walked ahead, her soaked shoes squeaking against the marble lobby floor. The doorman opened the door without question, a silent nod, all the acknowledgement required. In the guest apartment, Grace dried Liam off, changed him into warm pajamas, and tucked him into the bed. He stirred briefly, his lips forming a soft, sleepy whisper. "Is it okay now, Mommy?" Grace kissed his forehead. "It's okay now." In the living room, Nathan stood, wringing out the cuffs of his shirt. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was healing. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she finally said, her voice low. "Letting you go before any of this went too far. Before it turned into something I couldn't repay." Nathan shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." She looked down. "That's exactly why it scared me. I didn't know how to trust that." He stepped closer. "Then let me earn it, one day at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just us. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then Grace exhaled, a breath that carried weeks of fear and resistance with it. Okay. In the days that followed, everything changed, and yet nothing did. There were no grand declarations, no candlelit promises, just consistency. Meals shared, books read, dishes done together in a space that began to feel less borrowed and more like home. Liam adjusted quickly. He colored pictures of their family and placed them proudly on the fridge. Grace resumed writing in the mornings. Quiet reflections, journal entries, ideas for the children's center she once dreamed of. Nathan, for his part, became a daily presence. Not as a savior, but as something far more rare in her life, a constant. One evening, after Grace had put Liam to bed, Nathan knocked gently on the open door to her bedroom. He held 2 mugs of chamomile tea. "Trade you tea for 10 minutes of your time?" She smiled, accepting the mug. "That's a good rate." They sat by the window, watching the city shimmer below them. The conversation turned to memories. Hers of childhood summers in upstate New York, his of a bookstore where he met someone who once changed his world. "Her name was Claire," he said, voice hushed. "She believed in handwritten letters, quiet mornings, and always knowing what mattered most." Grace listened as he told her about the accident, the gift left behind, the guilt he had carried like a second skin. "For years I stopped feeling," he said. "I thought success would fill the void. It didn't." Grace didn't offer cliches. She simply reached for his hand. "You're not alone anymore," she said. The next morning, Nathan handed Grace an envelope. Inside was a proposal, an outline for a new initiative at his company's charitable arm, a center for single mothers, with Grace as its co-director. She stared at the pages, stunned. "You want me to run this?" "I want you to lead it, build it, shape it." Tears welled in her eyes, not from disbelief, but recognition. He saw her, not just as a survivor, but as someone capable of transforming lives. She said yes. That week, they toured an empty brick building in Brooklyn. It was old, but filled with potential. Grace walked through its bare rooms and imagined cribs, classrooms, kitchens filled with laughter and healing. She turned to Nathan. "This could work. We could really do this." He smiled. "I know." As the contractors began their work, so did Grace. She hired staff, designed programs, collaborated with local partners. The city that once seemed indifferent now opened doors, and she walked through them with purpose. But the biggest transformation happened within her. Each night, as she tucked Liam in, she no longer whispered promises she wasn't sure she could keep. She told him stories of hope, of courage, of people who stumbled but found their way again. And in every story, there was always a little boy with a cloth and a heart too big for his years. Nathan listened from the hallway, his heart full. Grace was not just healing, she was becoming, and that, more than anything, was the miracle he never saw coming. 6 months later, winter had returned to New York City. The skyline shimmered under pale morning light, snowflakes drifting softly across the East River. But in a small corner of Brooklyn, something far warmer than weather was taking root. The newly renovated Hopewell Center stood proudly at the corner of Hoyt and Dean Streets, a former warehouse now transformed into a safe haven for single mothers and children. Its walls, once bare and cold, now radiated with color, laughter, and the quiet resilience of people reclaiming their lives. Inside, Grace walked the halls with a clipboard in hand, her steps sure and steady. Her blonde hair, once tangled and tired, was pulled back into a loose ponytail, Her eyes, no longer shadowed by survival, shone with purpose. Each room told a different story. Toddlers giggled as they stacked blocks. Mothers gathered for parenting classes. Volunteers served hot lunches in the cafeteria. But everywhere Grace went, people smiled, because they knew. She wasn't just the director. She had once been one of them. In her office, Liam sat at a small desk beside hers, coloring with a quiet focus. He had started kindergarten last month, proudly carrying his lunch in a superhero-themed bag Nathan had picked out himself. The boy's transformation was perhaps the most stunning. His laughter was constant, his posture confident, his eyes unafraid. At 3 o'clock, the front doors opened, and Liam jumped to his feet. "Mommy!" Grace turned to see him running toward Nathan, who stepped inside with a light dusting of snow on his coat. He caught Liam midair, lifting him with a grin. "Hey, bud, how was school?" "I drew a picture of our house." "Did you? I can't wait to see it." Grace walked up, brushing a flake from Nathan's lapel. He leaned down and kissed her cheek. "Busy day?" "Every day, but a good one." That evening, their apartment was filled with soft music, the scent of roasted vegetables, and the sound of Liam singing to himself while building a Lego castle. Grace lit a candle on the dinner table. Nathan poured wine. They ate together, not in silence, but in peace. Later, after Liam was asleep, Grace and Nathan sat on the couch. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "Which one?" "The day Liam asked you for $10. Nathan chuckled. "Every day. It saved me." Grace looked up. "You saved us." "No," he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You saved yourself. I just happened to be lucky enough to witness it." She smiled, eyes misty. "Still, I wouldn't be here without you." "And I wouldn't be whole without you." The moment stretched between them, quiet and golden. Then Nathan stood and reached into his pocket. "I don't have a speech," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. "But I do have something I've wanted to say for a long time." Grace froze. He knelt. "You once asked for $10, he said. "Now, let me spend the rest of my life building a home with you." Her hands flew to her mouth, tears spilling instantly. Liam, half asleep in the doorway, clapped. "Say yes, Mommy." Grace laughed through her tears. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger. They held each other in the warm light of their living room, a family not born from perfection, but forged from survival, grace, and the audacity to hope. Outside, the city pulsed, but within those walls, winter no longer felt cold. It felt like home. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when they walked past the corner cafe where it had all started. The same city hummed around them, cabs, sirens, voices, but it no longer swallowed them. Now, it held echoes of something sacred. Nathan held Grace's hand. On the other side, Liam skipped between them, humming a tune only he knew, one arm swinging free, the other gripping his mother's fingers. They stopped by the terrace. The table where Nathan once sat alone was still there. The memory rushed back, but instead of the chill that used to follow him, Nathan felt warmth. A small voice, a dirty cloth, and a question that became a lifeline. "Please, sir, just $10. Grace squeezed his hand. He looked at her and smiled. From that table, they continued down the sidewalk toward the Hopewell Center, now in its second phase of expansion. Grace had recently launched a mentorship program for teenage mothers, and Nathan had just finalized a new tech literacy initiative for the older kids. Their work wasn't flashy, but it mattered. And every family who stepped through those doors knew this place was built not from charity, but from lived compassion. That evening, friends from the center gathered at their apartment for a potluck dinner. Children darted between rooms. Laughter spilled from the kitchen. A slow song played in the background. At the end of the meal, Grace stood, holding her glass. "I want to say something," she began, voice steady but full of emotion. "Not long ago, I stood on a street corner, unsure how I'd make it to the next morning. My son was hungry. I had nothing to give him except a rag and a prayer, and then a stranger didn't look away." She glanced at Nathan. "He saw us. He didn't try to fix us. He just stayed. That choice saved more than just our lives. It gave us a future." The room fell silent, hearts full. So if anyone here ever doubts whether kindness matters, let this be your answer. It does. Every time. After dinner, Grace and Nathan stepped onto the balcony. The city lights sparkled like stars fallen to earth. "What do you see when you look out there?" Grace asked. Nathan wrapped his arms around her. "I used to see a battlefield. Now I see 1,000 chances to begin again." She leaned into him. "So do I." Below them, the city kept moving. But somewhere inside its steel and noise, a little boy once asked for $10 to buy bread for his mother, and instead, he bought them all a second chance. Because sometimes, the smallest voices carry the biggest truths, and the quietest moments hold the power to change everything. The street was still the same, but now it was their street. The cafe, their beginning. The home, their reward. And love, unexpected, unpolished, unrelenting, was now the legacy they would carry forward. Forever.